In 1983, 12 children boarded a yellow school bus for what should have been a routine field trip to the local science museum. The day started like any other parents, waving goodbye, kids chattering excitedly about the dinosaur exhibit. And their teacher, Mrs. Winters, checking her clipboard one last time. No one could have predicted that by nightfall, the bus would vanish without a trace, taking with it 12 innocent lives and leaving a wound in the small town of Pinecrest that would never fully heal. For 4 decades, the case remained unsolved. The bus seemingly swallowed by the earth itself, until last month when a severe mudslide revealed something buried deep in the woods outside of town. Something large, yellow, and rusted, the missing bus that had haunted the community for generations. But what investigators found inside wasn't what anyone expected, and the discovery would force everyone to question everything they thought. They knew about that fateful day. The morning of the disappearance had dawned crisp and clear, with just a hint of autumn in the air as leaves began their transformation from green to gold. The children, ranging in age from 7 to 11, had lined up outside Pinecrest Elementary, permission slips clutched in their small hands, lunchboxes banging against their legs as they shuffled impatiently. Mrs. Winters, beloved by her students, for her kind smile and the candies she'd sneak them when they answered questions correctly, had been teaching 4th grade for 15 years and had led dozens of field trips without incident. The bus driver, Gerald Mackey, a retired Navy veteran who'd moved to Pinecrest seeking peace after years at sea, had been driving the route for nearly a decade. The Science Museum was only 30 miles away, a journey that should have taken less than an hour each way along the winding mountain roads. The bus departed at 9:15 a.m., with Mrs. Winters doing one final head count before giving Mackey the thumbs up to pull away from the curb. Security footage from the school showed the bus turning right onto Maple Street, the children's faces pressed against windows, some waving goodbye to parents who'd stayed to see them off. That was the last confirmed sighting of bus number 17. And everyone aboard. When the museum called the school at 11:30 a.m. to ask why the class hadn't arrived for their scheduled tour, the first tendrils of panic began to spread. The principal immediately contacted the police, who launched a search along the planned route, but found no evidence of an accident or breakdown. As hours turned into days, the search expanded, involving state police, FBI agents, and hundreds of volunteers combing every inch of forest, every ravine and creekbed along the winding mountain roads. Helicopters buzzed overhead, search dogs sniffed the ground for any trace of the missing children, and divers explored local lakes and rivers, all to no avail. Parents waited by phones that never rang, clutching school photos and stuffed animals, praying for news that never came. Theories spread like wildfire: a kidnapping, an accident in a remote area, or even more sinister possibilities that no one wanted to voice aloud. How could a bright yellow school bus with 13 people aboard simply disappear without leaving even the smallest clue behind? As weeks became months and months became years, the case grew cold. The annual candlelight vigils grew smaller, though the 12 empty desks in the school gymnasium during the memorial services never failed to bring tears to the eyes of even the most stoic townspeople. Some families moved away, unable to bear the constant reminders of their missing children. Others stayed, turning their pain into purpose by establishing foundations and safety programs in their children's names. The town itself seemed suspended in time, forever marked by the tragedy that had no resolution, no closure, no answers. Yet life went on, as it must. New children filled the classrooms, new teachers stood at the blackboards, and new bus drivers navigated the same routes. But no one in Pinecrest ever forgot the 12 children who left for a field trip and never came home. And then, 40 years later, after nearly everyone had given up hope of ever learning the truth, nature itself decided to reveal what humans had failed to find. The mudslide came after 3 days of torrential rain, the worst the area had seen in decades. It tore through the dense forest on the north side of Mount Crescent, uprooting trees and carrying boulders the size of cars down the steep slope. When emergency crews arrived to assess the damage and clear the roads, rescue worker Mia Collins spotted something unnatural among the debris, a patch of faded yellow metal, partially exposed by the shifting earth. At first, she thought it might be an old piece of construction equipment, but as more of the mud was cleared away, the unmistakable shape of a school bus emerged, its roof crushed by the weight of soil and time. Her heart racing, Mia called for backup, and within hours, the site was swarming with police, forensic teams, and officials from the long-dormant task force that had never officially closed the case. As floodlights illuminated the grim discovery, everyone present knew they were standing on the precipice of solving the mystery that had defined their town for generations. What they couldn't know was that the answers they sought would be more disturbing than anything they had imagined during the long decades of speculation. Isabella Isa Martinez had been 5 years old when her big sister Lily disappeared on that school bus. Growing up in the shadow of tragedy had shaped every aspect of her life, from her choice to become a forensic anthropologist to her inability to form lasting relationships. How could she, when the one person she'd loved most had vanished without explanation? Now 45, Isa had built a respected career identifying victims of disasters and crimes, bringing closure to families just like hers had never received. When the call came about the discovery in her hometown, she'd been lecturing at a conference 3 states away, but she'd walked off stage mid-sentence, packed her bag, and driven through the night to reach Pinecrest by dawn. Standing now at the edge of the cordoned-off area, watching as specialized equipment carefully removed decades of soil from around the buried vehicle, Isa felt a strange calmness settle over her. For 40 years, she'd lived with uncertainty, with nightmares of what might have happened to her sister and the others. No matter how horrible the truth might be, it had to be better than the not knowing that had haunted her for a lifetime. "Dr. Martinez, they're ready for you," said a young officer, his face solemn as he lifted the yellow tape for her to duck under. Isa nodded, pulling on gloves as she approached the partially excavated bus. The smell of wet earth and rusted metal filled her nostrils as she carefully made her way across the muddy ground. The bus lay at an angle, its front end pointed downward as if it had nosedived into the earth. Most of the windows were shattered, the once bright yellow paint faded to a sickly ochre, but the number 17 was still visible on what remained of the rear emergency door. Isa's heart pounded in her chest as memories flooded back, waiting on the porch for Lily to come home. Her mother's scream when the principal called, the look of devastation on her father's face as days passed with no news. She had dedicated her career to finding answers for others, and now, finally, she might find answers for herself. Taking a deep breath, she stepped toward the opening that had been cleared at the back of the bus, steeling herself for whatever she might find inside. The interior of the bus was a time capsule, preserved by the airless environment of its earthen tomb. Backpacks still rested on seats. Lunchboxes lay open with the remains of 40-year-old sandwiches turned to dust. A clipboard with a checklist of names, Mrs. Winter's careful handwriting still legible after all these years. But what struck Isa most was what wasn't there. No remains, no clothing scattered about. Nothing to indicate what had happened to the 12 children and their teacher after the bus had somehow ended up buried in this remote location. "This doesn't make sense," she murmured to the forensic team leader who stood beside her. "Where are they? There should be, .. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The team leader, Dr. Wilson, pointed his flashlight toward the front of the bus, where the driver's area was still partially obscured by collapsed metal and soil. "We found something there you should see," he said quietly, his expression unreadable in the dim light. It might explain why the search teams never found this place 40 years ago. Isa followed him carefully down the tilted aisle, stepping over debris, her trained eyes scanning every inch for clues. What she saw when they reached the front of the bus made her blood run cold. The driver's seat was empty, but the area around it told a story that defied easy explanation. The steering wheel had been removed, not broken off, but carefully disassembled. The control panel had been modified with additions that looked nothing like standard bus equipment, strange dials and switches that seemed out of place and out of time. Most disturbing of all was what Dr. Wilson illuminated beneath the driver's area, a tunnel, roughly 3 feet in diameter, leading down into the earth. It was dug from below, Dr. Wilson explained, his voice hushed, as if sharing a terrible secret. The bus didn't crash here. It was deliberately placed and buried. Isa stared at the tunnel, her scientific mind struggling to process the implications. This wasn't a tragic accident or even a conventional crime scene. It was something else. Entirely? Has anyone gone down there? She asked, already knowing the answer from the uneasy look that passed between Dr. Wilson and the other investigators. They were waiting for specialized equipment, for proper protocols to be established. But Isa had waited 40 years for answers, and her sister might have gone down that same dark passage. "I need a better light," she said firmly, extending her hand. No one argued, as a powerful flashlight was placed in her palm. The tunnel was surprisingly well constructed with wooden supports every few feet, preventing the walls from collapsing. It sloped downward at a gentle angle, the earth packed firm beneath Isa's feet as she carefully made her way deeper, the beam of her flashlight illuminating only a small portion of the passage ahead. The air grew cooler as she descended, and a faint, rhythmic sound reached her ears, like distant machinery or perhaps water dripping in a vast, empty space. Her training told her to turn back, to wait for the proper teams with the proper equipment, but the thought of Lily kept her moving forward. Had her sister walked this same path, frightened and confused? Had Mrs. Winters led the children down here, trying to protect them from some threat above? Or had someone else forced them down into the darkness? After about 50 yards, the tunnel began to widen, and Isa's flashlight beam finally reached what appeared to be an end. She slowed her pace, every sense on high alert as she approached what looked like a door, not a rough barrier of wood or stone, as might be expected in such a setting, but a proper door of metal, with a handle and what appeared to be some kind of electronic lock. The door was partially ajar, as if someone had left in a hurry without securing it. Isa hesitated, then called back up the tunnel. "I've found something. There's a door down here." Her voice echoed strangely, seeming to carry farther than it should in the enclosed space. After waiting a moment to see if anyone would respond or follow, she turned her attention back to the mysterious door. Professional caution ward with 4 decades of questions that demanded answers. In the end, there was really no choice at all. Pulling a tissue from her pocket to avoid contaminating potential evidence, Isa carefully pushed the door open wider and stepped through into whatever lay beyond. The beam of her flashlight played across a scene so unexpected, so completely at odds with everything she had anticipated, that for a moment she wondered if grief and exhaustion had finally broken her mind. She stood at the entrance to what could only be described as an underground facility, walls of concrete and metal, fluorescent lights humming overhead, and corridors branching off in multiple directions. But what truly stunned her was the symbol painted on the wall directly opposite the door, a stylized pine tree inside a circle, with 12 stars arranged around it, the exact same design that had been on the backpack Lily had been carrying. The day she disappeared, the symbol had haunted Isa's dreams for years, appearing in Lily's drawings in the weeks before the disappearance. Their parents had assumed it was something from a cartoon or a logo Lily had seen somewhere. But Issa had never found its source, despite years of searching. Now here it was, large as life, at the end of a tunnel, connected to the long-missing school bus. This wasn't random. This was a planned destination. Issa's mind raced with implications as she moved further into the facility, noting with growing unease that despite for decades of abandonment, the lights still worked and the air felt fresh and circulated. A control room of some kind lay to her right, banks of outdated computer equipment covered in dust but otherwise intact. To her left, a corridor led to what appeared to be living quarters, bunks, a kitchen area, and a common space with tables and chairs sized for both adults and children. But it was what lay straight ahead that drew Issa forward like a magnet. A large set of double doors with small windows that revealed a vast chamber beyond. Heart pounding, she approached the doors and peered through the cloudy glass, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness to reveal rows of what looked like specialized medical equipment surrounding examination tables. And on the wall, clearly visible even from this distance, were 12 photographs, school portraits, that Issa would have recognized anywhere. Dr. Martinez. The voice startled her, echoing down the corridor from the tunnel entrance. It was Officer Jensen, the young policeman who had escorted her to the bus. "You need to come back up. It's not safe down here without proper assessment." Issa knew he was right. Protocol existed for good reasons, and she had already compromised a potential crime scene. But the sight of those photographs, of Lily's face smiling down from that wall, made it impossible to turn away. "I found them," she called back, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "I found where they were taken." Jensen approached cautiously, his own flashlight beam joining hers to illuminate more of the strange facility. "What is this place?" he whispered, professional composure momentarily forgotten as he took in the improbable scene. Issa shook her head, unable to offer any rational explanation that fit the evidence before them. "I don't know," she admitted, "but someone went to extraordinary lengths to create it, and to hide it. And they brought 12 children and their teacher here for a reason." As if to punctuate her words, a distant sound echoed through the facility. Not the mechanical hum that permeated the space, but something else. Something that sounded disturbingly like a child's laugh. The search teams arrived within the hour, equipped with proper gear and protocols for exploring the mysterious underground facility. Issa had been firmly but respectfully escorted back to the surface, where she now sat in the mobile command center established at the site. Watching feeds from the cameras the exploration team carried, the facility was larger than she had initially realized, with multiple levels and sections that seemed designed for different purposes. The top researchers and investigators from around the country were being called in. But for now, the local authorities and Issa were left to try making sense of what they were seeing. The medical chamber she had glimpsed contained equipment that the technicians couldn't readily identify more advanced than what should have existed in 1983, but now, appearing strangely outdated, as if from a timeline that had developed differently than their own. Most disturbing were the detailed records found in what appeared to be a research office. 12 files with the children's names, containing medical data, psychological assessments, and notes about progress and adaptation. Mrs. Winters had her own file, thicker than the others, with references to her crucial role and continued cooperation. But nowhere in the initial search did they find any indication of what had ultimately happened to the 13 missing people. As night fell over the excavation site, Issa found herself standing outside the command center, staring up at the stars visible through breaks in the clouds. The same stars that had shone down the night Lily disappeared. The same stars that had witnessed whatever secrets lay buried in the facility below. A presence beside her made her turn. It was Sheriff Carter, a man in his 60s who had been a rookie deputy during the original investigation. His face was deeply lined, the weight of the unsolved case evident in his tired eyes. I always told them we were looking in the wrong places, he said quietly, not looking at Isa, but up at the night sky. The search focused on accidents, on ravines and rivers. Some thought it might be a kidnapping. But I always felt there was something else about this case. Something that didn't fit any normal pattern. He finally turned to her, his expression troubled. Dr. Martinez, in all your years of forensic work, have you ever seen anything like what's down there? Isa considered her answer carefully. No, she finally admitted. It defies conventional explanation, but that doesn't mean there isn't one. Whatever happened here was human in origin, Sheriff. Humans built that facility, humans drove that bus, and humans are responsible for what happened to my sister and the others. The sheriff nodded slowly, but something in his expression suggested he wasn't entirely convinced. There's something you should see, he said after a moment. Something I've kept all these years because I didn't know what else to do with it. He led her to his vehicle, an aging SUV parked at the edge of the site, and retrieved a weathered leather briefcase. From the trunk, inside was a single file folder, the edges frayed with age. This came to the station about a week after the disappearance, he explained as he handed it to Isa. No return address, no fingerprints, nothing to trace. My superiors thought it was a sick joke and wanted it buried, but I couldn't let it go. Isa opened the folder with trembling hands to find a single sheet of paper containing a typed message and a strange symbol, the same pine tree and stars that adorned the wall in the underground facility. The message was brief but chilling. The children are safe. They are needed. They are special. Do not look for them. When the work is complete, they will return changed, but unharmed. Below this was a date, October 17, 2023, almost exactly 40 years after the disappearance, and just 1 month before the mudslide that had revealed the bus. Morning brought a flurry of activity to the site as specialized teams arrived from various government agencies, their vehicles bearing insignia that Isa didn't recognize. She found herself increasingly sidelined as higher authorities took control of the investigation, citing national security concerns without further explanation. Dr. Wilson had been escorted to a debriefing that had lasted hours, and when he returned, he avoided making eye contact with Isa or answering her questions directly. The young officer Jensen, who had followed her into the facility, was nowhere to be seen. Frustration mounting, Isa sought out Sheriff Carter, hoping his decades of service might give him enough standing to get answers. She found him arguing with a stern-looking woman in a charcoal suit who had introduced herself simply as Director Chambers without specifying what agency she directed. "This is my jurisdiction," Carter was saying, his face flushed with anger. "These are our missing children. Our families have waited 40 years. Chambers cut him off with a raised hand. "Not anymore, Sheriff. By executive order, this site and everything connected to it now falls under federal jurisdiction. Your deputies will maintain the outer perimeter only. Am I clear?" Isa stepped forward before Carter could respond. "What about the families?" she demanded, professional composure beginning to crack. "Don't they deserve to know what happened to their children?" "To my sister." Director Chambers turned her cool gaze on Isa, assessing her with clinical detachment. "Dr. Martinez, I understand your personal connection to this case, but I'm afraid your involvement ends here. We'll be handling all family notifications once our assessment is complete." There was something in the woman's tone that sent a chill down Isa's spine, not cruelty. Exactly, but a complete absence of empathy, as if the human tragedy at the heart of the investigation was merely an inconvenient detail. "That's not acceptable," Isa replied, matching Chambers' cool tone with one of steel. "I'm not leaving until I know what happened to Lily." Something flickered across the director's face, surprise, perhaps, or reluctant respect. After a moment's consideration, she nodded curtly. "Very well, You have clearance to remain as a consultant due to your expertise, but you will follow protocols, sign all required non-disclosure agreements, and understand that certain aspects of this investigation may remain classified indefinitely. It wasn't ideal, but it was a foothold. Issa nodded her agreement, willing to accept any terms that kept her close to the truth. The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity as the underground facility was fully excavated and explored. Despite her consultant status, Issa found herself constantly obstructed, allowed access to certain areas while others remained mysteriously off. The medical chamber she had glimpsed on her first entry was one such restricted zone, now guarded by armed personnel who checked credentials with grim efficiency. The computer systems had been removed entirely, transported to an undisclosed location for analysis. Most frustrating of all, the 12 files she had seen, including Lily's, had vanished, with Director Chambers claiming no knowledge of their existence despite Issa's insistence that she had seen them with her own eyes. It was as if the most crucial pieces of evidence were being systematically removed before they could be properly examined. During a rare moment alone in what had been identified as a common area for the children, Issa found herself drawn to a small desk in the corner. Unlike the other furnishings, which were utilitarian and identical, this desk showed signs of personalization, small scratches and patterns that seemed deliberate rather than random. Glancing around to ensure she was truly alone, Issa ran her fingers over the markings, recognizing with a jolt that they formed letters. L-E-L-Y was H-R-E. Heart racing, Issa examined the desk more carefully, looking for any other messages her sister might have left behind. There, on the underside of the desktop, barely visible unless you knew to look for it, was another carving, not letters this time, but a small, crude map. It showed what appeared to be the facility layout, with an X marking a location on the lowest level, an area that hadn't been included in any of the briefings Issa had attended. Beside the X was a tiny carving of the now familiar pine tree symbol. This was it. Lily had left a clue, a breadcrumb for someone to follow. Without stopping to consider the consequences, Issa memorized the map, then made her way casually toward the exit, nodding to the guards as if she had completed her assigned tasks. Instead of returning to the command center, however, she circled around to a service entrance she had noticed during yesterday's tour, waiting until the guard stepped away to speak into his radio before slipping inside. The lower levels would be less heavily monitored, she reasoned, as the teams focused on the areas known to contain equipment and records. If she moved quickly and kept to the maintenance corridors Lily had marked on her crude map, she might reach the mysterious X without being detected. The lower level was eerily silent compared to the activity above, the air noticeably cooler and carrying a faint mineral scent that reminded Issa of caves she had explored during college fieldwork. Emergency lighting cast everything in a dim blue glow, creating long shadows that seemed to move at the corner of her vision. According to Lily's map, the X was located at the end of a corridor that branched off from the main maintenance tunnel, behind what appeared to be a storage area. Issa moved as quietly as possible, straining her ears for any sound that might indicate she wasn't alone. When she reached the storage area, she found it packed with outdated equipment and supplies, everything from medical kits to children's clothing still in plastic packaging, all bearing manufacturing dates from the early 1980s. The door Lily had marked was almost invisible, designed to blend seamlessly with the wall when closed. It took Issa several minutes of careful examination to locate the hidden release mechanism, a small panel that slid aside to reveal a numeric keypad. Her heart sank. Without the code, she had reached a dead end. But then she noticed something scratched into the wall beside the keypad, faint but unmistakable. October 17th, 83, the date of the disappearance. With nothing to lose, Issa punched in the numbers, holding her breath as she waited for an alarm to sound. Instead, The door slid open with a soft hydraulic hiss, revealing a small, circular room beyond. The room contained only one item, a pedestal in the center, supporting what appeared to be a journal bound in faded blue fabric. With trembling hands, Issa approached, immediately recognizing the butterfly stickers, decorating the cover identical to those Lily had plastered over everything she owned. This was her sister's diary, deliberately placed here where it might eventually be found. Issa opened it carefully, mindful of her forensic training, even as emotion threatened to overwhelm her scientific detachment. The first several pages contained typical entries from a 10-year-old girl, observations about school, complaints about parents' rules, excited notes about the upcoming field trip to the Science Museum. But beginning on the day before the disappearance, the entries changed dramatically. "Mrs. Winters told us a secret today," Lily had written in her careful cursive. "She said we've been chosen for something important, something that will help everyone in the future. She said we have to keep it a special secret, even from our parents. But tomorrow, instead of going to the museum, we're going to meet some scientists who want to see how special we are. I'm scared, but excited too. Mrs. Winters says we'll be heroes, but no one will know except us." Issa's blood ran cold as she turned the page to find an entry dated the day of the disappearance. "We're underground now." The bus driver wasn't really a bus driver. He knew about the secret place all along. "Mrs. Winters says we'll be staying here for a while, doing tests with the scientists. They're studying our brains, because we all have something special they call the potential. I miss Mom and Dad. But Mrs. Winters says we can't contact our families yet because it would ruin the important work. Some of the other kids are crying. But I'm trying to be brave. The scientists seem nice, especially Dr. Chambers. She says I have the strongest potential of all." Dr. Chambers, the same name as the director now controlling the investigation. It couldn't be coincidence, but it also seemed impossible, given the 4 decades that had passed. Issa continued reading, hope rising as she realized the diary contained entries spanning several weeks after the disappearance. Lily had been alive, at least for some time, documenting daily routines of tests, lessons, and what she called special training for their gifts. But the entries grew increasingly disturbing, describing headaches, nosebleeds, and strange dreams. Shared by all the children, the final entry, dated nearly 6 weeks after the disappearance, sent chills down Issa's spine. "Something is happening to us," Lily had written, her usually neat handwriting now shaky and erratic. "The tests are changing us. Jamie can move things without touching them now. Sarah knows what you're thinking before you say it. I can see things that haven't happened yet. Dr. Chambers says this is just the beginning, that we're evolving the way all humans will someday. But I'm scared of what I've seen coming. I keep having the same dream, the 12 of us standing in a circle in a white room, holding hands while a bright light grows around us until it swallows everything. Mrs. Winters won't help us anymore. I think she's afraid of what we're becoming. If anyone finds this, if you're reading this, Issa, because I know somehow it will be you, we didn't just disappear. We were taken, and then we were transformed. Don't trust Chambers. She doesn't want to help us. She wants to use what we can do." And I think the entry ended abruptly, as if Lily had been interrupted mid-thought, the pen dragging a jagged line across the page. The remaining pages were blank, offering no resolution, no explanation of what had ultimately happened to Lily and the others. "I was wondering if you'd find your way down here," came a voice from behind her. Issa whirled to find Director Chambers, standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "Your sister was quite resourceful. We never did find where she'd hidden her journal, though we searched extensively after the incident." Issa clutched the diary to her chest like a shield, mind racing as she tried to make sense of what was happening. This woman couldn't possibly be the same Dr. Chambers from Lily's entries. She would have to be in her 80s or 90s by now. Yet the woman before her appeared to be in her 50s at most. "Who are you?" Issa demanded, backing away until she felt the pedestal against her legs. "What did you do to them?" Chambers sighed, a sound that conveyed not regret but impatience, as if explaining simple concepts to a child. "We offered them opportunity, Dr. Martinez, the chance to be at the forefront of human evolution. Your sister and the others had genetic markers we'd identified as precursors to extraordinary abilities, abilities that, properly nurtured, could have changed the course of human history. And for a time, the program was succeeding beyond our wildest expectations." "Then what happened to them?" Issa pressed, fighting to keep her voice steady. "Where are they now?" Something shifted in Chambers' expression, a fleeting shadow of what might have been genuine regret. "The process was imperfect. The children progressed faster than our models had predicted. Their abilities developed exponentially, beyond our capacity to contain or control. Your sister in particular demonstrated remarkable foresight. She saw what was coming before even our most sensitive instruments detected the anomaly." Chambers took a step forward, her clinical detachment wavering for the first time. "We lost control, Dr. Martinez. On the 42nd day, something happened that we still don't fully understand. The children gathered in the testing chamber without instruction, formed a circle, just as your sister described in her diary, and then she shook her head, seemingly at a loss for words. The energy readings went off the charts. There was a flash of light so intense, it burned out all our recording equipment. And when it faded, the children and Mrs. Winters were simply ... gone, not dead. There were no remains, just absent, as if they had been translated out of normal space-time. We've spent 40 years trying to understand what happened, to replicate the conditions without success." Issa stared at the woman, trying to process the incredible claim. "That's impossible," she finally said. "People don't just vanish into thin air. And you," she added, narrowing her eyes, "would have been a child yourself 40 years ago. You can't be the Dr. Chambers from Lily's diary." The director's lips curved in a smile devoid of warmth. "Time, Dr. Martinez, is not the straight line. Most people imagine the work we began here had implications far beyond the development of psychic abilities. The children opened a door that day, a door we've been trying to reopen ever since." She gestured to the diary Issa still clutched protectively. "Your sister's journal may contain insights our decades of research have missed. I'll need to take it now." But Issa had no intention of surrendering this last connection to her sister, this evidence of what had really happened beneath the pine forests of her hometown. "No," she said firmly, backing toward the other side of the small room where she had noticed another door, half hidden in the shadows. "This belongs to my family. The world deserves to know what really happened here, what you did to those children." "The world isn't ready for that knowledge," Chambers replied, her voice hardening as she moved to block Issa's path. "Nor for what's coming next. The mudslide wasn't an accident, Dr. Martinez. Nature didn't reveal the bus, your sister did." Issa froze, her mind struggling to make sense of the claim. "What are you talking about? Lily disappeared 40 years ago." Chambers shook her head, a strange light entering her eyes. "Disappeared, yes, but not in the way you think. The event we witnessed wasn't an ending, but a transition. We've detected energy signatures identical to those from that day appearing, with increasing frequency over the past year, centered on this location. The dating on the letter Sheriff Carter showed you wasn't a prediction, Dr. Martinez. It was a promise." She took another step forward, hand extended. "The children are coming back. Or something wearing their forms is the bus appearing was just the harbinger, the first physical manifestation of their return. We need to be prepared, and that diary may be key to understanding what they've become, what they want. Your sister is trying to tell us something, reaching back across whatever barrier they crossed." Before Esau could respond, a low rumble shook the facility, dust drifting down from the ceiling as the lights flickered. Chambers' hand flew to the communication device at her ear, her composed facade cracking as she listened to whatever was being reported from above. "It's happening again," she whispered, more to herself than to Esau. "The energy signature is building, just like in '83. The rumbling intensified, and a strange humming filled the air, vibrating in Isa's chest, like bass notes, too deep to properly hear. "We need to get to the containment chamber," Chambers said. Urgently, all pretense of control abandoned as she grabbed Esau's arm. "Bring the diary. If they're trying to communicate, it may be through you. The sibling connection could be significant." But Esau pulled away, an inexplicable certainty filling her that whatever was happening, she needed to face it on her own terms, not as part of Chambers' decades-long experiment. "No," she said again, backing toward the hidden door she had noticed. "I'm taking Lily's journal and leaving. This facility should be exposed for what it is, a monument to cruelty and unethical experimentation on children." The humming grew louder, the vibrations so intense now that small objects in the room began to rattle and shift position. Chambers looked genuinely afraid for the first time. "You don't understand what's at stake," she insisted. "What's coming isn't just your sister, it's something else, something that's been changed by forces we can't comprehend. Please, Dr. Martinez, I've dedicated my life to understanding what happened here. Help me finish what we started." But in that moment, illuminated by the flickering emergency lights, Chambers' plea only strengthened Isa's resolve. This woman, or perhaps her mother, her predecessor, whoever the original Dr. Chambers had been, had stolen Lily's chance at a normal life, had torn apart 12 families in the name of scientific advancement. Whatever was happening now, Esau would face it without the tainted guidance of the organization that had orchestrated the original tragedy. "No," she said for the third time, her voice steady despite the chaos building around them. "Whatever's coming, I'll meet it as Lily's sister, not as your research assistant." And with that, she turned and ran for the hidden door, pushing through it as the lights failed completely, plunging the room into darkness, broken only by the strange pulsing glow that seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. The corridor beyond the hidden door was unlike anything else Esau had seen in the facility, not the utilitarian concrete and metal that dominated the main structure, but rough-hewn stone that suggested this passage predated the research complex. Perhaps significantly, the humming was louder here, echoing off the stone walls, and the air felt charged with static electricity that made the hair on Esau's arms stand on end. She moved forward by instinct more than sight, one hand trailing along the wall for guidance, the other still clutching Lily's diary. The passage sloped upward, curving in what Esau estimated was the direction of the surface, though after several minutes of walking, she began to doubt her sense of direction. Just as her legs were beginning to tire from the steady climb, the passage widened into a small chamber, and Esau stopped short at the sight before her. The walls were covered in drawings, crude at first glance, reminiscent of cave paintings, but on closer inspection, revealing details that no prehistoric artist could have captured: the school bus, the facility below, and 12 stick figures, surrounded by swirling patterns of energy. Most striking of all was the central image, the now familiar pine tree symbol, but elaborated here with intricate patterns flowing from its branches, connecting it to smaller images that Esau recognized with a shock as modern buildings and landmarks. As she stepped closer to examine the drawings, her flashlight beam illuminated something at the base of the central tree image, a small cavity in the stone, just the right size for hardly daring to breathe. Esau pulled from her pocket the one item she had carried with her since childhood, a small carved wooden charm in the shape of a butterfly that Lily had given her the morning of the field trip. "Keep this safe for me," Lily had said with unusual seriousness. I'll want it back when I come home. For 40 years, Issa had kept that promise, carrying the charm through college, graduate school, and her career. A tangible reminder of the sister she had lost. Now, with trembling fingers, she placed the butterfly charm in the cavity. It fit perfectly, as if the space had been created specifically for this moment. For several heartbeats, nothing happened. Then, with a soft click that seemed impossibly loud in the hushed chamber, the charm rotated on its own, settling into a new position. A seam appeared in the wall where none had been visible before, widening to reveal another passage beyond. This new tunnel was different, smoother, with a faint luminescence to the walls that provided just enough light to see by. The humming had changed to resolving from chaotic vibrations into something almost musical. A harmonic progression that felt strangely familiar, though Issa couldn't place where she might have heard it before. The air grew warmer as she advanced, carrying a scent like ozone after a lightning strike mixed with something sweeter, like the wildflowers that had grown behind their childhood home. The tunnel ended abruptly in a perfectly circular chamber with a domed ceiling, the walls made of some material that seemed to shift between stone and light. Solid, yet somehow permeable to her gaze, offering glimpses of stars and swirling galaxies. Beyond, in the center of the chamber, stood a simple wooden table, and seated around it were 12 children in the outdated clothing of 1983, their faces turned toward her with expressions of calm expectation. And there at the head of the table, a girl with dark braids and a butterfly barrette, who looked exactly as she had the day she disappeared, was Lily. "You found us," Lily said, her voice unchanged by the decades that had passed, still the sweet, slightly bossy tone of the 10-year-old sister Issa remembered. "I knew you would, Issa. I saw it." The other children nodded in agreement, their eyes reflecting the strange light that filled the chamber. But how? Issa managed, her scientific mind struggling to process what she was seeing. The diary said. "You vanished," Chambers said. Lily wrinkled her nose in the expression of distaste that had always preceded her strongest opinions. "Dr. Chambers only understands part of what happened. She thinks she was studying us, but something else was studying her, studying all of them, using their curiosity and ambition to create the perfect conditions for what needed to happen." She gestured around the chamber. "We didn't disappear, Issa. We transcended. The abilities they were trying to nurture in us were just echoes of what humans will eventually become, what some of us already were becoming. They thought they were pushing evolution forward, but they were just noticing what was already underway." "I don't understand," Issa said, moving closer to the table, desperate to touch her sister, to confirm she was real and not some hallucination born of grief and exhaustion. "If you've been alive all this time, why didn't you come back? Do you know what your disappearance did to Mom and Dad, to all the families?" A shadow passed over Lily's face, genuine regret clouding her youthful features. "We couldn't come back, not as we were. Time moves differently where we've been. For us, it's been more like 40 days than 40 years, and we weren't ready until now. The changes had to complete, the understanding had to grow." She reached out, but instead of taking Issa's hand, she placed something on the table between them, a photograph Issa recognized from their parents' mantel, taken the summer before Lily disappeared. "We've watched over you all, in the ways we could. I saw you become strong, Issa. I saw you help other families find their missing loved ones. You never gave up on me, and that connection is why I could reach across to you now, why I could help. Reveal the bus when it was time." "Time for what?" Issa asked, a sense of foreboding mixing with the joy of seeing her sister again. Lily exchanged glances with the other children, some unspoken communication passing between them before she answered. "Time for the next phase. What happened to us was just the beginning, Issa, a test case, a proof of concept. The world is ready now for what comes next. She stood, and as she did, her form seemed to shimmer, the image of the 10-year-old girl, overlaid with something else, a taller figure, still recognizably Lily but older, evolved, her eyes reflecting depths of knowledge no human could possess. We need your help. The transition is beginning, not just for a few children this time, but on a larger scale. Those who created the facility, who ran the experiments, they sensed what was coming but misunderstood it. They thought they could control evolution, harness it for power. But this change isn't about power as they understand it. It's about becoming what humanity was always meant to be. The other children had risen as well, their forms similarly shifting between the children they had been and something more. What are you asking me to do? Issa whispered, both afraid and inexplicably moved by what she was witnessing. The being, who was both Lily and something beyond Lily, smiled. And in that smile, Issa saw the sister she had lost, still present, still loving, still essentially herself, despite whatever transformation had occurred. Be our voice, Issa. Help others understand what's happening, so there's less fear, less resistance. The changes will come regardless, but suffering is optional. Those who embrace the transition will find it beautiful rather than terrifying. She gestured to the diary that Issa still clutched. It's all there, not just what happened to us, but what I saw coming. I wrote it for you, knowing that when the time was right, you'd find your way to it. Issa looked down at the blue fabric cover, then back at the gathered children, who were something more than children. And Chambers. Her organization, what about them? Lily's expression hardened slightly, the first hint of something truly inhuman in her transformed features. They'll try to interfere, to control what cannot be controlled. Your task, if you accept it, is to ensure they don't repeat their mistakes on a larger scale. Issa stood silently, weighing the impossibility of what she was being asked against the equally impossible reality of standing before her long-lost sister in this chamber that seemed to exist at the intersection of dimensions. Her scientific training, her rational mind, insisted this couldn't be happening, yet here she was, experiencing something that defied conventional explanation, but felt more real than anything she had known in her 40 years of searching for answers. If I help you, she finally said, I need to know everyone will be safe. That what happened to you won't happen to others without their consent. Lily nodded, understanding in her ancient young eyes. The children in the experiment didn't choose, and that was wrong. What comes next must be embraced, willingly or not at all. That's why we need you to help people understand they have a choice. She extended her hand across the table. No longer the small hand of a child, but something that seemed composed as much of light as flesh. Will you help us, Issa? Will you be the bridge? Issa looked at the offered hand, then at the sister she had mourned for 4 decades. In that moment, standing at the threshold between what had been and what might be, she made her choice. Reaching across the divide of time and transformation, Issa took Lily's hand. The moment their fingers touched, a surge of energy flowed between them, and Issa gasped as images flooded her mind, not just Lily's experiences during and after the disappearance, but visions of what was to come. She saw the world at a crossroads, humanity facing challenges that current systems and thinking couldn't address, and she saw the potential Lily had described, an evolution not just of abilities but of consciousness, of connection, of understanding. She saw her own role in what was to unfold, the story she would tell, the truth she would reveal about what had happened beneath the pine forests of her hometown. The visions faded, leaving her breathless but filled with a certainty she had never known before. I'll help, she said simply. Lily smiled, the expression somehow both the mischievous grin of the sister Issa remembered and something infinitely wise and ancient. We knew you would. It's why we waited until now, why we reached back to this moment. The world needs bridges, Isa, people who can stand between what is and what will be, helping others across. She gestured toward the tunnel through which Isa had entered. Go back now, tell our story, begin the work. When the time is right, we'll meet again, not just you and I, but all of humanity, and what we've become. As Isa made her way back through the luminous tunnel, she felt as if she were moving between worlds, each step taking her further from the transcendent reality she had glimpsed and closer to the mundane world she had known all her life. Yet something had changed within her. The connection established with Lily remained, a warm presence in her mind, guiding her back toward the surface. When she emerged from the hidden passage, she found herself not in the underground facility, but in the forest above, dawn breaking over the mountains as the first search teams arrived for the day's work. In her hands, she still carried Lily's diary, but now she understood it was more than a record of what had happened. It was a blueprint for what was to come. Director Chambers and her organization would try to suppress the truth, to maintain control over forces they only partially understood. But Isa had seen a larger truth, and she knew what she had to do. With renewed purpose, she made her way toward the command center, where reporters had gathered overnight, hungry for updates on the mysterious discovery. It was time to tell the story, not just of 12 children who vanished in 1983, but of what they had become and what their return meant for humanity's future. As the morning sun illuminated the pine forests surrounding the excavation site, Isa stood before the gathered press, Lily's diary clutched firmly in her hands. She had made a strategic decision to speak before Chambers could implement whatever containment protocols were surely being prepared. 40 years ago, she began, her voice steady despite the extraordinary tale she was about to tell. 12 children and their teacher disappeared without a trace. Yesterday, I found my sister Lily's diary, hidden in a secret chamber beneath the facility where they were taken. A murmur ran through the assembled reporters, cameras flashing as they captured the moment. This wasn't an accident or a conventional crime, Isa continued. It was an experiment, an attempt to accelerate human evolution that succeeded beyond anything its architects could have imagined. She opened the diary, prepared to read the passages that would begin to unveil the truth. As she did, she felt a subtle shift in the air around her, a familiar humming that only she seemed to notice. And in her mind, she heard Lily's voice, as clear as if she stood beside her. Begin the bridge, Isa. Help them understand what's coming. We'll be waiting. On the other side,